Welcome, David Graddol, writer, broadcaster, and most recently author of English Next India. David, we launched your report at the British Council English for Progress Third Policy Dialogue day before yesterday. What has been, to your mind, the reaction to that report from what you've gathered at the conference in the last 2 days?
Well, I have to say it was with some diffidence that I stood up the other night to give that first presentation, because the report is not entirely good news for India. It's actually suggesting that English is not progressing at a speed which is nearly fast enough for the needs of the economic growth, sustained economic growth. And I was therefore rather gratified, I have to say, that many people in the audience, and indeed in talking to people in this conference since the last 2 days, they seem to be very much in sympathy with the kind of comments I've made. So I don't think that anything is badly wrong there. It is, of course, extremely difficult with a country like India, which is so vast, so complex, to make any kind of generalizations that are useful. That, for me, has been the biggest challenge of the book. It follows English Next, which took a global overview, and I now realise that in many ways it's easier to do something about the whole world than it is about a particular country, and having to sort of drill down and get in very specific areas, not least because some of the key data that you want to know is just not there. Data
is one of the you said in your presentation as well that it was one of the biggest challenges. Do you have any recommendation or a resolution to that kind of thing? Data is a huge problem about practically everything in India.
Well, I mean, having said that, I have to say that it's been getting better in recent years. For example, there's a lot more information on particularly primary schools in terms of the number of students, what language they're studying through, the level of the school equipment, the number of teachers, the class sizes. All of that information now is gathered together in a timely way, which of course is the other key thing about data in India. A lot of it is a long way out of date. Right. Early 2009, the latest current figures on selected educational statistics, for example, is actually is 3 years, nearly 4 years out of date. Now that kind of thing in a very fast world, fast-changing world, is just not sort of good enough. So things are beginning to happen, and it's IT actually, and the use of computers that is allowing that to happen, and the construction of databases. But it's not happening yet. For instance, the equivalent data is not available for secondary schools. There's very little data about universities. And in terms of the people who speak English in India, that's perhaps the biggest gap of all. I mean, you can hardly imagine that no one knows, even within a sort of vague, sort of very rough estimate, how many people speak English in India. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing.
David, one of the things that you seem to be arguing, and correct me if I'm wrong in your report, is this idea of English as a tool rather than English as a content language. Could you expand on that idea? Is India using English as a tool, or is there some hang-up?
Well, I think there's a very important status change going on in India now at the moment. I mean, the English was the language of an elite group who kept it largely to themselves, and English was, speaking English signalled your membership of that group and got you into certain kinds of coveted jobs. But in the past, most of those good jobs were in the public sector. Suddenly what we've had in the last 15 years or so is a huge growth in the private sector, very good jobs in the private sector, well-paid, salaried jobs, which require English. And they require English not just as a kind of status symbol, but because it's the working language, it's needed very much as a tool. So we now have a situation in India where jobs are appearing that actually require English as a tool, as it were, rather than as a status symbol. And the worry, I guess now, is that there are not enough people coming out of the vernacular medium schools and universities to fill the jobs needed in that private sector.
I think Som Mittal, yesterday on the panel, kind of contradicted you on that. He said that the resource pool is really not drying up, and as president of NASSCOM, to say that it's not drying up is something. Would you like to comment on that?
It's a very interesting argument that I'm seeing within the corporate sector, because, of course, within NASSCOM, there are more than one voice. There are voices saying there's a great shortage, that we can only employ 15% of graduates are employable. Yeah. Now, I think that in my own interviews with the corporates, I actually got the same kind of response as some seem to be saying there. Very little distress about the future, being able to meet their future needs. But I think that actually illustrates another side of the problem here in India, which is that the number of jobs in the private sector haven't been growing very fast in recent years. We had a big explosion at the beginning, and now what's happening largely is that where new jobs arise in the private sector, they're being lost in the public sector. And where there are new jobs in the private sector, it's often at a loss of jobs elsewhere. So we're getting this kind of musical chairs going on to some extent, when really what we want to see is a much faster development in the domestic sector. And those are new jobs that will be coming along, and everyone's been waiting for them for a long time, which will need English speakers.